Today, there's a story about my grandpa Pops. He lived on a big farm with lots of land and berries. One summer, he caught some people stealing his berries. They were selling them at farmers' markets. Pops warned them, but they came back and took even more. Pops wasn't someone who would just let this go. He was determined to stop them. So my grandpa, who we called Pops, had a big farm with lots of berries. He really loved making drinks from these berries. But he had a problem. People kept sneaking into his farm and taking his berries. Pops didn't like this at all. He worked so hard to grow those berries. Pops came up with a smart plan. He decided to make his berry farm even bigger. He planted so many berry bushes: strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. Pops told me these plants were special because they grow back every year. The first year, they don't make many berries, but the next year, they make a lot. He built a fence around half of the berry field, but he left some parts open. Pops knew the people who were stealing his berries would probably come back. They thought they found a secret spot with lots of free berries. But Pops had a sneaky trick for the part of the field without a fence. In that part, he used a very special, but stinky, fertilizer. It was made from raw human waste, which is really yucky. This kind of fertilizer is different from the normal kind, like cow fertilizer. It makes the berries taste really bad, and you can't wash off the bad taste. Pops sprayed this stinky fertilizer on every bush in the open part of the field every single day. Then, the next summer, just like Pops thought, the same people came back to take more berries. They didn't know about Pops's secret fertilizer. It took lots of berries from the open part of the field and went home. The next day, those people came back, and they were super mad. They told Pops that he tried to make them sick, but Pops was very smart. He smiled and showed them all the papers that said he was allowed to grow food on his farm. In Canada, where Pops's farm was, you're not allowed to take things from a farm without asking, especially if it's a farm that makes food for people to eat. The police came and talked to the people who took the berries. Pops explained everything to the police. The berry thieves got in big trouble and had to pay a lot of money because they took the berries without asking. I watched all this happen from the porch of Pops's house. It was very exciting to see Pops outsmart the berry thieves. Now let me tell you another story about when I worked at a big hospital. There was a room in the hospital with lots of computers that helped the doctors and nurses do their jobs. I worked in this room with other people to make sure the computers were working right. Our job was really important because the computers had information that the doctors needed to help sick people. In this room, we had a boss named Karen. Karen was supposed to be in charge, but she wasn't very good at her job. One time, something went wrong with the computers, and Karen didn't fix it. Because of this, a patient in the hospital didn't get the help they needed right away. This was a very big problem, but Karen didn't get in trouble for it. I was really upset that Karen didn't do her job right. People could get really sick if the computers didn't work. So I started writing down every time Karen made a mistake. There were a lot of mistakes, and they were all really important. But Karen was tricky. Whenever she was close to getting in trouble, she would say that someone was being mean to her. Then the hospital would have to look into it, and Karen wouldn't get in trouble. I had an idea to try and fix this problem. I suggested that everyone who worked in the computer room should take a test called the Net Plus exam. This test wasn't super hard, but it also wasn't super easy. It was just right in the middle. I thought everyone could pass this test, except for Karen. If we all passed the test, we could do more things with the computers, and we would also get more money for our work. It took a very long time to make this happen. I had to talk to lots of people at the hospital and go to many meetings. We had to write new rules for our jobs and make sure everyone understood them. It was a lot of work, but I really wanted to make things better in the computer room and show that Karen needed to do her job better. In the story, I had to deal with a lot of challenges and red tape to improve things at my job. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was necessary. I wanted to make sure everyone at work had a fair chance, so I pushed for big pay raises. This was important because I was asking my coworkers to take a difficult test, and it wouldn't be fair to ask this without offering something good in return. Finally, after lots of discussions and meetings, the raises were approved. I also included the exam requirement in my own job description. This was important because I wanted to keep my skills sharp and be able to help out when others were sick or on vacation. Plus, I also got a nice pay raise, which was a great bonus. Everyone at work was nervous about the new plan, but they understood why it was important. I explained that passing the exam would make them more skilled, and they would earn more money, about 20% more than before. I think it also helped that I was taking the test too, showing that I was part of the team. The hospital agreed to pay for the training and the test. We scheduled time for everyone to study and even paid for a second attempt if they didn't pass the first time. We gave everyone 8 months to pass the test. Everyone passed on their first try, except for Karen. She didn't pass her second or third attempt either. Karen thought this whole plan was a conspiracy against her. She told everyone it was all about getting rid of her. But really, it was about making sure everyone was capable and skilled at their job. When Karen finally had to leave, it felt like a huge achievement. I had worked hard to make the workplace better and safer. People at work were relieved and happy when Karen was gone. It was like a breath of fresh air. Some of my coworkers even found better jobs because of their new skills. Now let me tell you about another part of my life. When I was growing up, I didn't have a good relationship with my father. He was not a kind man, and my sister and I didn't get along with him. My sister left home when she was young, and I always felt a bit upset that she left me alone with him. But as I got older, I understood why she had to leave. My dad worked at a local factory, which was then taken over by the Defense Ministry. They let go of anyone without at least a high school degree, which included my mom. But my dad stayed until he retired and even got a military status, which meant he had to behave like a military person. I had a tough childhood with my dad. I grew up with a lot of anger and mental health issues. When I turned 18, I joined the military to get away from home. After 3 years, I was discharged because of my mental health problems. I moved to the city where my sister lived, trying to start a new life. During this time, my dad got sick with cancer. My sister, who had reconciled with him, paid for all his treatments. She spent a lot of money on his recovery. I visited him after every operation, but it was never easy. My life was hard too. I was struggling with work and school and dealing with my mental health. Then one day, my mom called, crying, saying that my dad was seeing someone else. I didn't want to believe it at first, but my sister confirmed it was true. My sister went to visit our parents with her daughter to share some happy news. She was pregnant. But instead of a happy visit, it turned into a big fight when my mom saw a message from another woman on my dad's phone. My sister told me it was the first time in years she saw our mom so angry at our dad. When my sister tried to protect our mom from our father, things got really intense. My sister's husband had to step in too, especially because she was 3 months pregnant. It all ended with a very emotional trip back to the city, after they all had shouted at each other a lot. The only good thing was that my mom managed to take my dad's phone with her. We all tried to convince my mom to get a divorce, but she didn't want to. She had been with my dad for almost 35 years and thought maybe he would change. But we decided to cut him out of our lives for good. Then, half a year later, my dad's side of the family started calling me. I usually don't answer calls from people outside my close circle, so I was surprised when my dad, aunt, and grandma all called me in one day. They were suddenly being nice and wanted me to visit them. I knew something was up. It turned out they wanted to sell the house that was in my name. My dad had transferred it to me before his first operation. My grandma had also given me the land it was on. They probably wouldn't have done that if they knew how things would turn out later. I sensed something fishy, so I told them I'd think about it and left quickly. On my drive back, I came up with a plan. I went straight to my sister's house, where my mom was staying, and we started to put together a plan. With the help of a lawyer, we found out that because the house and land were in my name, my dad's family couldn't claim them. We could also prove my dad was unfaithful before the separation with the phone my mom had brought. We decided to go to court. At the first hearing, my dad made up lies about my mom. The officer seemed like he might be friends with my dad, so my lawyer asked me to let them handle it. They told us the case would take a long time, but we didn't give up. My dad eventually agreed to our terms, which meant he couldn't claim the house anymore, and he had to divorce my mom. She could stay in the house, but not as mistress. Then we decided to get a little payback. My sister gathered all the receipts for the medical bills she paid for my dad's treatment. We billed him for it, which was pretty unusual in our country since children are usually expected to take care of their parents. We took him to small claims court and started seizing his assets when he couldn't pay. We also reported him to his former factory for not acting like military personnel should, since he had a military pension. They stripped him of his rank, which cut his pension in half. Everyone in town talked about it, and my mom was really happy to hear about it. But things didn't end there. My aunt, who was in a lot of debt, showed up at my sister's house, yelling at her and her kids. My sister had security kick her out and warned me she might come for me next. I found out about my aunt's debts and decided to expose her. I created a Facebook account and sent pictures of her lavish spending to everyone she owed money to. She ended up getting threatened by them. My dad and his side of the family learned that they couldn't mess with us. We stood up for ourselves and made sure they couldn't take advantage of us anymore. It was a tough journey, but we came out stronger and closer as a family. In the end, my dad was left a miserable old man. His mistress left him, and he was living in a small house with almost nothing. His cancer came back, and this time no one was going to pay for his treatment. My mom considered reconciling with him, but we convinced her not to. My aunt had to sell her house to pay off her debts and was living in a small place. I left my grandmother out of this because she was very old and loved her son too much to see his faults. I still visited her once a year, but stopped talking to her otherwise. She lived in a small house on the land that was now in my name. All this felt like more than just revenge. It was like we had completely changed the course of my dad's life. He had lost everything: his family, his status, and his comfortable life. I used to work at a pizza shop when I was 16, and that was the worst job I ever had. The staff was terrible, and I was bullied there. But dealing with my family's drama was a whole different level of stress and challenge. In another story, working at the pizza shop was really tough for me, especially because of how the other staff treated me. They were not nice at all. They would often give me their tasks because they didn't feel like doing them. It felt like I was the one running the entire shop, even though I was the youngest person there. They would make me do the hardest jobs, like carrying heavy boxes of dough from the basement, while they took the easier tasks like carrying toppings. The other workers at the pizza shop also made me deal with the most difficult customers. These customers were often very demanding and sometimes rude, but I always had to be polite and try to make them happy. The other staff members would call me management as a joke, even though I was not a manager. They just didn't want to deal with the tough situations themselves. When the district manager would visit our store, the other staff would blame me for things that weren't done or not done right. It was unfair because I was trying my best, but it seemed like everything was put on my shoulders. To make matters worse, our store manager either quit or was fired about a month after I started working there, and the store never got a new manager. This made the workplace even more chaotic and stressful. After 3 months of being in such a toxic environment, I was really feeling upset. It wasn't just the hard work, but also the way I was treated by the other staff. They didn't respect me or appreciate the effort I was putting in. Working at the pizza shop became a daily challenge, and it was wearing me down. I was young, and this was my first job, so it was a tough introduction to the working world. But despite all the difficulties, this experience taught me a lot about dealing with tough situations and people.